everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 8. I have a special guest this time around. It is not Larry Miller. It is my good friend, Connor Kern. Connor Kern, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
We first met going to 514 in youth group, and he has a really cool story. So we wanted to kind of interview him and kind of get some information out of him because he is an amazing person with a lot of stories, and I think it can help a lot of people. So what was interesting is when I first started doing youth group, you weren't there yet.
No, I wouldn't have been there yet.
I'm trying to think because I don't know if I did 2 years first or whatever, but when I first started, I was the main basketball person. Yeah. And I was like, dude, no one's good at basketball. This is stupid. And then this dude shows up and he's like 6'4". But you know how that goes. Just because someone's 6'4", I'm like, man, he's probably not good. And I'll never forget. You're like, yo, let me get that ball. You shoot a shot. I'm like, oh, he's way better than I am. This sucks. So tell me about your like basketball journey. Wait, let's go with that because a couple of my friends are basketball people. Where did you go to high school? When did you're like, dude, basketball is my thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm from Pickerington, Ohio, so east side of Columbus, probably about 10 miles out. Grew up playing basketball and baseball, and kind of at my size and just in general, I was more of a baseball player. I was
I didn't know that.
Left-handed. I was a pitcher. I had, I guess, more of a future in baseball, but there was something about like this boringness to it.
Dude, basketball, so
baseball, other than when I was pitching, it was like, man, like I'm not enjoying this anymore. And this is as I got older too, because I loved baseball up until like 8th grade, freshman year. But I played both, and I tried really playing both all year round. Now, when we're talking baseball, you can't really play all year round in Ohio.
Right.
So basketball got very serious for me. 8th grade to freshman year, I transferred. I went to Lakeview Junior High, which feeds into Pickerington North.
Okay.
And a guy that my dad had actually coached in high school got hired at Pickerington Central going into my freshman year. And it was a really big transition for me, but we decided it was best that like I transferred to Pick Central for basketball purposes.
Right.
Played varsity as a freshman, and I shouldn't have. I mean, we're talking about a 14.
Yeah, that's wild.
We're talking about a 14-year-old that weighed like 150 pounds.
Yeah. But you could ball.
There's no reason I should have been out on the court with these 18-year-old like grown men. But I think it was a blessing in disguise, me getting put in that situation because had a fine freshman year, like nothing crazy. And then sophomore year, we basically had the same team.
Okay.
Going into that sophomore year, we had some seniors. Our team was just absolutely loaded. I mean, I was in our starting 5, and I think I was the worst player.
Yeah,
and I can kind of go into like who was on our team. But that sophomore year, we won state. So we won the Division I state championship in 2012. And that's kind of where that freshman to sophomore year is where I was like, all right, I'm going to start taking this very seriously. That's when I quit playing baseball. Mm-hmm. Started playing AAU all year round. Solely basketball, and like there was just this exponential growth, this compound interest that like kept happening from no longer playing baseball, no longer worrying about that. Sophomore through senior year, very successful. I ended up being, this is different now because the guy that graduated last year beat mine and the other guy's record, but I was number 2 all time at our school for scoring.
Let's go.
Guy that played with me freshman to senior year was number 1.
Okay.
So to think of kids from 14 to 18 playing together, we both broke the same scoring record.
Right.
He got first, I got second.
That's wild.
He's in the NBA now.
Oh, so, dang. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So he was much better than I was.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Really, really good high school career. And then I had the blessing, opportunity. I went to Arkansas State for college. And
just insane.
that was in the Sun Belt, Division I school in Arkansas, which if you would have told me when they first started recruiting me, like, hey, where is Arkansas on the map?
You're like, dude, I don't know.
I was not that 5th grader that was good at geography, right? I wasn't good with the states. But there I was finally like away from my parents, my like friends. I kind of got to make this own identity for myself,
right?
And I think that was also where I like took the wrong turn. Like I got this huge like ego that I was playing Division I basketball. It's all I cared about. I was always a good student, so like that never really faltered. But I guess this is kind of going into my testimony. Like going into my freshman year, I was playing basketball at a higher level than I thought. Like, I thought I was like better than Arkansas State. I thought I should have been at like this high major. And man, like first week of school coming back in September, we were there all summer. First week of school in September, tore my ACL. First time ever getting like majorly injured. That's
a huge injury
in a sport.
Huge injury.
I guess for those that don't know, tear your ACL, that's 9 to 12 months of not being able to
You're
play.
Doing nothing. Yeah.
You're basically
you're not coming back.
Basically just rehabbing. And man, that put me in a really dark spot. Like I turned away from going to church. I turned away from friends and family, and I really was just trying to fill this cup up inside of just like nothingness, like women, alcohol, whatever could, I guess, fill this void, and nothing did.
Right.
I was one of those kids that if I was really mad, or like I said, my dad was a coach, so he was a high school coach in Columbus as well.
Okay.
So basically, I had 24/7 access to a gym if I wanted it. So if I'm like in a bad mood, I was like a gym rat type guy.
You're just like, I'll just go and shoot because it clears your mind.
Always wanted to be in the gym, and you get this injury, and now it's like you're mad, frustrated. You can't.
Right.
Can't go to the gym. Right. You can't even lift weights for 15 months. So I remember I lost like 25 pounds when I first.
That's crazy.
When I first tore my ACL, just basically eating bad and going out. But man, that was a dark spot in my life. And then sophomore year comes around, I'm still just a full year of bad decisions. Trying like, hey, like, can this fill my cup up? No. Like, all right, let's try this. No. And it just kind of compounded. And luckily, like, praise God that I had this one teammate that never stopped, like, trying to pour into me. He was a senior at the time, like me going into my sophomore year. And we were really good friends. We were just living two complete separate paths.
Right.
And I remember towards, like, November of my sophomore year, he was like, hey, man, like, I'm getting baptized at this college ministry. Now, granted, he invited me every Wednesday for my entire freshman year.
Yeah.
And
every time's no. You're
never
like,
went.
Nah,
no, like, I'm good. He invites me to get to go to his baptism, and he was one of my best friends at the time. So I was like, you know what? Like, I remember from like my Catholic background that like this is important.
This is a big deal.
So I was like, I'll go because he's one of my friends. And man, when I tell you, the sermon, amazing. The sermon just pierced my heart. I remember like to this day, Blake was our college pastor, and he spoke on godly marriage, godly dating, and that's something I'm really passionate about now. But because of that, like, just pierced my heart. I wasn't living that way. There was nothing in my life that reflected me being a godly boyfriend, godly husband, even a godly friend.
Right.
And that really just like I said, pierced my heart. And I remember reaching out to Josh. He got me in touch with Blake afterwards. And a couple of weeks later, man, like, gave my life to Christ, like, in Blake's office.
That's crazy.
And you can ask, I still talk to Blake. He's one of my mentors. He's probably upper 30s now. 3 kids, like, beautiful wife, 3 beautiful kids. Like, he is setting that example of a godly husband in a godly relationship, and just being like that super supportive father to his kids, right? So he ended up mentoring me for the next 3 years I was there. And he always thought I was going to be, if you ask him today, he was like, he's going to be this guy that like gives his life to Christ, gets baptized, and then it was all like for show. And you just kind of step away from it and never show up again.
Right.
But yeah, I ended up like leading a Bible group for the next 3 years, like at Arkansas State, and really just expanding my faith. I think I had a good background knowledge because I was one of those kids that grew up Catholic and was like forced to go to church. As all like Catholic kids seem to be.
Right.
So I did like I thank God that my mom made me go to church now, because I was always mad back then. But I was like, oh, like, I had this foundation that was built as a child that I did not realize I had. So 3 years of there, Bible study, and then I graduated. Because of my knee surgery, I had eligibility left. And we didn't even really get into this, but my sophomore year, after like giving my life to Christ, getting baptized, I ended up tearing my ACL again. So same one. So I missed my freshman and sophomore year of basketball. So the difference now was like that cup that was empty was filled with
Mm-hmm.
God. So even though I was no longer playing basketball, I had like a Christian group of friends. I had a mentor. I had this church I was going to on Sundays. I had college ministry on Wednesdays, and it was something that like I'm now like full. Like there's something that had more purpose outside of basketball.
Right.
So I ended up playing last 2 years, junior, senior year, technically my freshman, sophomore year of basketball.
Right.
Graduated, and I ended up grad transferring to the Citadel, which is in the Southern Conference. It's in Charleston, South Carolina, for anyone that does not know. It is also a military college.
Yeah.
But it is a military college for undergrad. So I was a grad student. Basically, my scholarship provided an apartment in Charleston, or a stipend to pay for it. And man, like the people I met there are just so instrumental in my walk with God. Really enjoyed my time there, not only from a relationship aspect, but also basketball. I really enjoyed myself as well. And then, one of my buddies, I always talk about him when I talk about my testimony, because I remember when I first moved there in July, he was living with me before they could go on campus, because you can't be in the barracks during the summer. And something happened, and he basically just came to me one day and was like, like, I want to read my Bible more. Like, how do you read the Bible? So I was able to sit him down and give him this like very easy method that I used when I was first reading the Bible,
just getting started with it. Yeah.
And it was from Blake. So it was kind of cool.
It's just like slowly.
Blake
it's amazing how it works.
Gave me this blueprint of like how to read and I guess interpret and discern the Bible. I was able to give that to Hayden, and now fast forward 4 years, Hayden was in full-time ministry.
Oh my gosh!
So just seeing,
just a trickle effect.
Seeing the Lord work like in the lives of people around me was truly inspiring.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But yeah, me and him are best friends to this day. He awesome. Played professionally in Australia, and then I think he's about to go back over. We talked a couple of days ago.
He's going to do that again.
So he's going to go back over. He's in Georgia now with his girlfriend. She is in the military, so she's pretty much stationed in Valdosta, Georgia.
Oh, so that can work out for him. Then.
So they're there, and I think he's about to go back overseas. But that would be, they moved back in 2020. Unfortunately, I didn't think I'd ever move back to Columbus, but an opportunity I had in 2020 was I felt like I had this calling to be in some type of like ministry.
So I mean, when did you feel like you had a calling? Was that during basketball, like in college, and you kind of were like, I'm just going to ignore that because I'm playing basketball? Or was that not it? Was it after basketball when you were like, that calling really started? Or was it when you went to church and you had that pierce through your heart, that message? When did you go, I know I should be doing this?
Man, I would say it was more early on when I was getting poured into and mentored by Blake and just seeing kind of where my passion aligned with. Okay. And it really aligned with the people around me, which were college age students. Okay. But then also like his children I got really close with, as well as like high school level. So I think, God had put on my heart that I do have this heart for the next generation. But I've realized as I've gotten older, like, man, I have a heart for young adults.
Yeah.
Because I think that, guys and girls in their 20s to like, let's even say low 30s, there's so much room for growth, like in that age, that we're kind of just missing the ball. So I think as a sophomore, when I started leading that Bible group, I was like, oh, like I could do this.
Yeah.
Never thought it'd be like a full-time thing, but it was always something that was going to be a part of my life from now on. Now graduating from the Citadel in 2020, I had an opportunity to go to Australia to play basketball, but also be at a church in like their K through 12 ministry and their like basketball program.
Right.
So that obviously did not happen due to COVID.
Yeah.
And you could not travel.
Everybody's stuff. Yeah.
Couldn't travel overseas. So that's when I moved back home and spent about a year and a half really trying to find this home church that I had a really good one I loved in Charleston. I also had one I adored in Arkansas. So now I'm coming back home to a place where I grew up, but I grew up Catholic. So it's like, I'm not going back to the Catholic church.
Yeah.
Like I need to find this home church, which like finding that home church and finding that, I think like those relationships within your local church like the local church is so important for so many reasons, but like it gives you a home. And then I moved to New Albany. I worked in New Albany, so I was like, hey, I'll just move here too. Lived with my mom for a year and a half. I was like, I'll just move to New Albany. It's close to work. Got into that corporate life that everyone dreads, but got into the corporate world.
That corporate.
But I went to CrossFit New Albany. Outside of basketball, I was like, where am I going to get like this fitness, this competitive juice? Like, where's this going to come from? So I went to CrossFit New Albany.
CrossFit,
now that enters Joel and Carmen.
Because Joel's a huge.
Correct. Enter Joel and Carmen into my life, and we were in like the same classes, just working out, became friends. I remember one day they just asked me what I did for work. I told them. I asked them as well, like, hey, like we're pastors at this church in New Albany. At that time, I was going to a different church every, I would say 2 to 3 months, because I don't want to just give a church one Sunday, right? So I would go.
Was that Rock City?
I went to Rock City. I went to a church in Pickerington. Went to another one in Columbus. And it just, there was never that like very just homey, I should be here feeling. And I remember Carmen and Joel invited me to a Sunday. And I want to say this was like the 2 Sundays after Thanksgiving of like 2021.
Okay.
And I went there by myself. Because obviously I'm going by myself.
Right. Which is hard enough. That's hard, just to be like.
Which I was also going by myself to these other churches too.
Yeah.
So like at
least you were into it.
Doing it, which I was super comfortable with. And I get that some people wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I went, and I remember the very first week that I went there, Carmen and Joel introduced me to John. They introduced me to Bryce, who like has been a huge blessing in my life. I mean, he's one of my best friends now to this day. And I think it was cool to, like, they made it so you could start building relationships at that church. They didn't want you to be like a stranger.
Yeah.
And I think right away there was some piece of me that got connected to that. Because everyone's relationally driven. I think it's really hard to like say you're not. Like, oh, I'm a loner. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
We all
people
strive.
crave, and we need
relationships. And we need like godly relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because you can have stale, mediocre relationships, but those godly ones, like, really they pour into your heart. And man, like Bryce and John have really poured into me, and I'm glad to say like I've become friends. Bryce kind of like, I guess, forced me to like do more.
And which is good.
That's when I got into being the 6th grade,
the youth group,
6th grade leader. You were 8th grade, so you did go through 2 years.
Without you
before I was there. Now they're 7th graders, and I think it's really cool. Like, everyone knows that age is like kind of puberty age too.
Right.
So it's really cool to see the growth of them, not just like spiritually, but like physically.
Like it's both. You get to see.
We have a kid. We have a kid in our group that grew like 8 inches last year. I'm like, holy cow!
Right.
But it's really cool to now. I've been poured into so much, like, since my walk with God started. And like, now it's really cool to go to our youth ministry on Sunday evenings and like be able to empty that cup out.
And you're emptying that out because you're constantly getting filled, and it's just a cycle.
I got to baptize one of my kids last year. I think I'm going to be doing that again in a few weeks with another kid. So it's just really cool to see like God work like in my life. And it's all because I had a buddy that kept inviting me. And if I think God was always after my heart. So I do think I eventually would have came back to Christ, but there's a big emphasis on these relationships, because like, we're called to go and make disciples of all nations, and we hear that and we're like, maybe we got to go overseas. Maybe
it can mean a lot of things.
Can mean a lot. It's like, no, like, just invite your friends to church, and like, see what God will do. Like, plant that seed and let God sow and reap it. And it has been a tremendous ride, and it has been so cool to see.
Right. So seeing your story and just kind of where you're at now. I'll say this: within the last just like 2 years, I would say, like, seeing you first in youth group to now is like, you're like a whole different person. Like, it's kind of weird. It's just crazy to see. But you also had the opportunity to go to Cambodia this year, and it was a group of people, and Bryce was there. And how many was it? 10, 12?
There was 10 of us from 514.
10 of them from 514. Which, you know what? I'm just going to stop. What's really cool about 514 is, I thought when I first started going to, is when I went there, and it's just funny that you said the same thing, is everybody like was intentional.
Correct.
There was a genuine care where I was like, that felt different than, normally when not all churches, but, a lot of churches I'll go to, and it's like, go there, listen to the sermon, and then you leave. Nobody says anything, you know what I mean? And you're like, that was okay. Like, I don't know. And it's like, they would stop me and want to talk to me and ask how your day is. And it was just like, whoa, it was just, it's just something I truly cherish. But anyways, going back to Cambodia, you had the opportunity to go there, which is just a whole nother experience. Now, was that something that you felt like God always placed on your heart? Did you have a drive to go, that's something I want to do? Like, I long to go to other areas, the different corners of the world to do something like that? Or was that just out of the blue and you were just like, I'm going to just be open to this?
Yeah. Being involved in basketball, you get a sense of like very multi-ethnic, multicultural aspects just in the basketball realm. Generally being the minority, right?
Yeah, right.
So like that, and that's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah,
and
facts.
You build these relationships with people that come from other cultures, and I think it gave me a passion to learn other cultures. But then, coming to have a relationship with God, that made it kind of even more evident. But in 2019, I went to China for a month with Athletes in Action. Okay, and it was a mission trip around basketball as well. And Hayden, who I mentioned earlier, like he was on the trip with me, and like a truly life-changing trip, I think, for me. But it kind of gave me that heart of that, like Matthew 28, like go and make disciples. So then started working, like I said, but in 2021 I got to go to Belize for 2 weeks on a mission trip. That was with kind of Athletes in Action too, and I wasn't playing basketball anymore, but it was the same director from Athletes in Action.
It's amazing how those connections work their way out.
Do you want to come on this trip? And I was like, well, I don't play basketball anymore. Not really.
Yeah.
I was like, do you want me to come as a coach? And he was like, no, like as a player. And like, so I got to like kind of get back into it, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
But then, that kind of put on like wanting to kind of deal with overseas stuff. When this Cambodia opportunity came up, Bryce talked to me about it, and it was, I want to say it was such an easy yes, but it wasn't, because, your job, you're leaving it for 2 weeks. Like, am I going to be allowed to do this? But it was such an easy yes to like, I wanted to do it. Figure out the logistics, and it worked out, and we got to go.
And you got to go. Man, so
life-changing.
What are like key takeaways that you learned from there where you're sitting here now? Because how long ago was that? That was
about a month.
It's been a month, roughly, just say. So about a month. What is something where you're like, I still think about it because it has just, it's impacted you so much? Because over there is just way different than it is over here, and the kids are different over there, and the adults are they think differently than we do, because we're all worried about whatever, getting pizza at 5 o'clock. So what is like a takeaway where you're like, or maybe something that you saw God move in that place where you're like, I'm never going to forget this, like something that maybe somebody needs to hear, where you go, wow, because it's always good to hear like a story where God's moving, and sometimes it's hard to go, is God still moving? You question that stuff. So what is a takeaway or a story where you go, wow, I saw God move, like it was just incredible? Is there anything?
Well, I think you just saying like God moved.
Yeah.
Is like that's I think we seem to put God in this little box of like, he's not moving where we are. But,
right.
When we were over there, it was just they seemed to have so little, yet like there was like pure joy, like in their eyes, like in their hearts, and we're at a church that is very modern, and we have these, we have all these instruments, and our worship is awesome. Right. Love our worship.
The worship is bar none.
Literally adore it every Sunday.
It's so good.
And two of the girls that were on our trip were on our worship team, and it was really cool to see them like singing to these kids. But as a taller guy, you normally stand in the back because you don't want to block all these little kids'
naturally.
views. Yeah. So I remember one of the days we were in the back during kids camp, and I'm worshiping. I'm a big like hands up, hands to the side. If you stand next to me, you might like
you're gonna get whacked.
But you're looking into this crowd, and you're seeing these little kids like praying, hands open. And Cambodia is a country that is 2% Christian. which is crazy. But it's like, hey, like if God is moving in this country that is only 2%, like how much more can He move like in ours? But in that country, like God was moving because we were giving Him a space to move. And I think that is one thing that I truly brought back is like they say like grass will grow where you water it.
Right.
I think God moves where like we let Him move in our life. You know, we tend to hold on to our finances and we hold on to these relationships. So we're holding on to it. We're not letting God have it.
Right.
So we're not letting God move in these aspects. But it was like a full surrender of these kids, of the directors and the teachers. And we did a home visit one day, and man, 10 walls, dirt floor.
Right.
But I remember we were talking to the girl and her mom. I kind of stepped to the side. I was getting really emotional. Just me. I'm an emotional guy. I cried so much on that trip. It was fine.
Right.
But they were kind of on stilts, like this house. I was like, man, if I had this house, like I'd be so unhappy.
You would be like, yeah.
So one of the pillars on the house was just in Sharpie. It said, "Are you happy?" Yes. And it like,
oh man, that's your.
It rocked me.
Yeah,
because,
like, that's wild.
We put so much emphasis on this like materialistic part
Absolutely.
of our life.
Absolutely.
And like I said, they had so little, but because they had God, they were happy. And that was it. That was all they needed. That was a big thing I brought back. Is like we don't need all these things as long as we have God. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having these things, but that was one thing. I was a God moving, but seeing the teachers and the directors, even if they weren't Christian, the way they truly cared for these kids and the way they like led them, it was just inspiring to see like TJ and Rachel like singing to these kids, and then you had Kaylee, Abby, and Cambria just like doing the crafts and like they're just smiling and laughing and really like being so joyful like with these kids. Sarah was awesome. Bryce was great. Bryce got to share. Bryce had me preach one day, which I had never done.
Yeah.
So
great way to start, baby, right there.
I preached to the teens, so the teen camp. Like I preached, and man, so nervous to do that. But there was like this peace that came over me when I started, and it was really good. Had a little bit of the enemy after that. Like I remember talking to Bryce in the hotel, and then ended up talking to John about it too. I was like, man, the enemy's just in my ear. Like someone else could have done this sermon better.
Immediately, was that after you spoke
after.
it? Isn't that amazing how that works?
And it was just like no, like you shared the gospel. Like that's what we're called to do. We planted the seed, and God reaped it. But Tim, if you don't know Tim, he was on our group. He preached to the kids. And phenomenal job.
Of course,
Loved him to death.
He's great.
And he's been great even in my life since we've been back. Austin shared with the teachers.
Okay.
So Austin did a great job. But man, the whole team there was this strange, just like beautiful energy that like
unexplainable.
Our team shared with each other, whether it was at the school, whether it was outside of it. But man, like we became so close, and we actually just did a dinner last week with everyone again, and it was just like sharing in these memories, and it's just happy tears and crying, like kind of going back to the trip. But our team just like I think I'll have relationships with them for the rest
forever.
Of my life. I think it's because we shared such a like beautiful experience. But man, if I could say one thing, it's literally like God moves.
Yeah,
like that's like the biggest takeaway is like God will move.
I like what you said with, how did you say it? With space, like you have to give God space and He can move. It reminds me, there's a Bible verse, I can't remember what it is, but when Jesus is going to different towns and stuff, and there's one particular one where it says He's only able to really heal a couple people because they don't really want Him there. And Correct. It's just like, wow, like they're and it's still the same today as you cannot allow any space for Jesus. And that, I mean, He needs His space and you need to give Him His space. And that's cool. That's a takeaway. I mean, it makes me go, man, I need to give more space to God, and He will move and He will show up when you do that. So that's an amazing story. So I think one thing we want to close with is kind of being like a disciple. Yeah. I think for us being younger, and you have more pull than I do because you're younger and cooler, but I have that pull as well, and it's waking up every day going, I need to be, what do I need to do to be a disciple, to turn these kids' lives to Jesus, point them in the right direction. And now that we are at the age where we're at, it's like being a manly God and a disciple, a manly disciple. And there's a different terminology for that instead of, I'm just a disciple. And it's like, there's not a lot of guys that I know personally that are our age, that are older men in their 30s or late 20s that are trying to push.
I'm not 30 yet.
These right? How old are you? 28? Whatever, dude.
Not 30 yet.
Whatever, man. Anyways, he's not 30 yet, guys. He's also single, if anybody, which I am too, But anyways, back to the heart of the story. So what is like, because a lot of people, and I know a lot of people watching, they've never had a mom and dad growing up that went to church, that said, you got to do this, you get Wednesday nights, Sunday night. That was my life. That's like the only thing I knew, which I rebelled against that. But a lot of people don't even have that. And you have an interesting story with your mom and dad, which I'm not even super familiar with. So kind of run us through that, and talk us through like being a manly God who's discipling kids now, and how you're doing that, because you didn't have that growing up, and how you're doing that now, and it's affecting so many kids. So how are you doing that now?
Yeah, I mean, my parents separated. I mean, I don't even think I was 2 years old yet. Okay. So the only life I've known is
separation. Yeah.
And like I said, my mom made me go to a Catholic church in Pickerington. Yeah. I had to go to Sunday school. She's very active in her faith, which is I got a good example of that growing up.
Yeah.
But I never had this 2-parent household where you're getting led by your dad. You see how your dad is loving your mom. You're like having dinner at a table. Like my mom and I had, like, I love my mom to death, but we had a lot of like TV tray dinners.
Yeah.
Where we just kind of had dinner, like her and I, like quick after baseball, after basketball, run through Wendy's, Taco Bell, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I never had this example of what a like good marriage should look like, because I never had it in my life. So I think I had a very shrewd view on like intimate relationships.
Do you think that like growing up, did that upset you growing up?
Yeah.
Do you think that
looking
affected you? Yeah, looking back on it. Because some people will say no, and maybe they didn't. I don't know. But I would feel like, having that, like you said, like dinner, if you could have it with mom and dad, boy, that would have been nice. But you have TV dinner. Things are different. And,
things are different.
Which shout out to your mom. Wow.
Yeah.
She.
What a woman.
What a woman.
Yes,
so yeah, continue.
But I never got that, right? So I had this shrewd view on like intimate relationships, especially like male and female, because I just never had the example. And I think that is why Blake was so instrumental to my life. He would invite me into their house. He was my college pastor and mentor. He would invite me into their house on Sunday nights, and I truly got to see like what a Christian marriage can look like, what a godly husband can look like, and what a godly father that is pouring into their kids look like. And that really just set a tone for me and what I want. And like I said, I didn't have the example, but what I did have was an example of a broken family. And that was always on the back of my mind. So when it came to dating for me, it was like, I don't know if I can marry this person because I'm a one and doneer. Right. I want to, be married and not have that separation, because I know what it did to me emotionally as a kid. And I don't want my child to have to go through that. So you kind of get picky, which is also not fair to the woman or to myself. But I think going through the time with Blake, and now, you're seeing other examples within our church, and like some of the people in our Cambodia team like are married, and it's cool to see like their lives in these like godly marriages, and like God has his hand on their marriage. Abby and Nick are engaged, like seeing like God's hand on the relationships in my life have been super impactful. But it's like, I know that like right now in a season of singleness that, you know, God is molding me into a like godly husband. And I'm going to lead my wife well. And I'm going to lead my children well. That makes me emotional.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But I know I'm going to do it because God is like poured into my life. I have friends pouring into my life that I'm being set up to when I do find that woman and we do get married and we do have kids and we build this life together. Like, she's not going to be the center of my life. God will be.
Right.
And I think our relationship will be better with me having a good relationship with God. Same thing with my kids. Like, I want to raise my kids in this godly household where, like, hey, like, your dad adores your mom, but your dad loves God more.
God way more.
And like, and it'll be really special, like, when that time comes.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, like there's this heart and drive for relationships, but I think like the spiritual relationship is even better. And I know I didn't get a good example of it growing up, but I like truly know because of what God's done in my life that I will give that example to like my kids.
That's awesome. Wife. That is awesome. It reminds me of like a lot of people will say, or they'll get frustrated and they'll go, you know, it says God will give you the desires of your heart. And I think what a lot of people get confused about is obviously the waiting time, you know, whether you're single or whatever your situation is. But a lot of times the desires of your heart overtake the desire of God. And now all of a sudden you're going, you know, the desires of my heart, Lord, blah, blah. And then but the problem is your desire of your heart is more important to you. Yeah. It should be God, you know? So it's awesome to hear that. So, you know, when with you discipling and stuff like that, do you feel all of those people kind of like pushing you and making you do all of this? Can you look back and just go, I cannot believe like what God is doing just from college life to where you're at now? Are you just like, you can't believe the way how much God has moved in you?
Yeah.
Like it's just incredible to look back at that. I want to make sure I don't like miss any other.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to look back on, but like even to this day, you know, we're all sinners. We all still sin, but because of our God, like we're forgiven.
It's unreal.
And we know
it's unreal.
I know if I die today, where I'm going, and like the comfort in that. I'm not saying I want to go die, but
right. But if you did,
it had to be forgotten.
If you did,
you know,
right.
But yeah, it's cool to see, even in the darkest seasons of my life, to look back on them and see that God had His hand in it. Because God would never let you fall further than what He can't catch you and bring you back.
Amen.
I've had seasons of like almost at the edge of like I'm turning away completely, but I was like, nope, like come back. So yeah, I mean, prodigal son.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We've all had those stories. Yeah.
Story.
Right. Okay, so wait, I got one more question for you. What is one piece of advice you would give someone struggling with their relationship or identity in God? That was put you on the spot there, because I think we've all been there, and it's interesting because like I'll be the first to admit it. There are times like that were in my life where I still struggled with like, do I even go to church anymore? Should I just hang it up? Like, is God even there for me? And there's people that I know, there's people that I talk to, and they just struggle with their identity. It's almost like they don't know who they are. And some of them they are basketball players.
Yeah.
And that's and me on such a smaller scale that's just what we were. Like, that's all we cared about. That's all we knew. And then when it was taken away from us, or you graduated, it doesn't have to be sports. It can be whatever. Maybe you think your identity, maybe it's work. I don't know. Then all of a sudden it gets real quiet and you go, who am I? And then you can go into I know guys that have gone into depression for years, and they're still struggling and they don't know what to do because they don't know. And you can only say so much. What is something you would say to them and just say, this is, something that helped you maybe when you tore your ACL and you're just like, dude, I don't like, how do I go from here? What was something that was positive besides maybe your friend, because he's the man. I mean, what was like, did you ever get to a point where you go, okay, like I've got to pray every day. I'm going to go to, was there a goal you set or anything of that nature?
I don't think that, you kind of hit on it a little bit. Like, we find our identity in these like worldly things. Like for me, it was basketball for the longest time.
Right.
And for me, it was like women too. It was your identity is in like
like, I can get this girl
the
or
women
whatever,
you can talk to, or basketball, or now as you get older, it's like the job you have or the money you make. And even it can be, even for Christians, it can be the same thing. We find this identity in stuff that is tangible and we can see it, because it's very easy to say, like, this job is my identity because it's what I'm doing from 9 to 5. And you can
see it and you go, yeah, that feels good.
You get the paycheck every 2 weeks, or once a month. But, when I think of my identity in God, I go back to the Bible on what God says we are. Like, we are loved, we are forgiven, and we are made in His image. And if He's this all perfect, all knowing God, and we are literally made in His image, we are made for purpose.
Right.
We're made for a purpose that is more than this job that we have that we're going to retire at 65. It's more than a sport that you're probably going to be done playing at 24.
Right.
And it's more than these, temporary pleasures, and like temptation is huge. But man, like, when you realize this stuff is temporary and God is eternal, I think your perspective changes. And knowing that, like, the fruits of the Spirit are in us, the Holy Spirit is in us. The same Holy Spirit that raised God from the dead is literally living in us daily.
And I think people forget, like, you don't understand or grasp that. You're just like, oh yeah. I mean, even Christians need reminded of that.
So, like, my identity in God is that, like, I am loved by Him. I'm forgiven for my sins, and I have this identity of being made in the image of God. And, like, man, that's a beautiful identity.
That feels good. Yeah, that is the best identity.
That is a beautiful identity, and there's beautiful purpose in your life when you allow God the space.
Right,
to call you, to give you purpose. And man, your purpose could be someone who is a janitor in a school. But man, because you have God, you're the best janitor. All your work is you're going to work hard because God is a worker.
You're doing it exactly. That's good.
We talk about this in church now. Like one of the biggest aspects that we can be like God is in our work, no matter what that is.
Right.
You with IT, like I work in sales, but if we work hard, no matter what we do, we're glorifying God.
Right.
So our identity can be being a hard worker.
Right.
Because we're made in the image of God. God was a worker. Now we are workers, and that is the easiest way to be like Him. So no matter what your identity is, no matter what you're doing, I think whatever you're doing, if you work hard at it, and you might not like it. There's a lot of people that don't like their jobs, but man, like, work hard, because like that hard work glorifies God.
Right.
So,
and He sees that. That's good. That is really, really good. Well, thank you again for doing this with us.
This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys again on the next episode. Have a good day.